Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 11th episode of Green Thumbs and Good Vibes, your podcast about all things gardening and cultivating fruits and vegetables and the sustainable lifestyle that comes along with it. We're your hosts, as always, Colin and Mitchell, and we are so thrilled that you are joining us today. So sit back, relax. The topic for today is we're going to talk about a few things that went wrong in our garden this year, a few things that went right, and just kind of give you guys a little summer update. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Mitchell, where are we going to start today?
I think let's talk about bringing stuff into the garden. So from starting seeds and then moving out into the garden. Because I know we kind of had opposite issues with this, since I'm in Indiana, you're out there in California. Here in Indiana, we almost didn't even have a spring, basically. Once it turned spring, it just got very, very, very hot. Although beforehand it was very, very cold. So my issue here in Indiana, I had a bunch of plants started. They're perfectly ready to go out into the garden, but it's way too cold. It's basically still winter. So those plants sitting indoors, they start to get leggy. The roots start to ball up in the containers. I was able to transplant some of them just into bigger pots and then put that in my greenhouse. And the greenhouse had a heater. So that was pretty good. Definitely helped out. Although when you have like 100 plants, it's kind of hard to get 100 little pots and transplant them all. So certain things like the okra, the zucchini just got very root balled up. And then when I put them into the garden, it took them quite a while to start up. And I know you kind of had the opposite issue out there, where it just didn't warm up quick enough, right?
Right. So our spring came pretty normally. And then it didn't stop. Usually we have kind of a nice early summer, things start to warm up gradually, but consistently. But that just didn't happen out here in the Bay Area where we got a lot of rain at the beginning of the year, which was great. But that then resulted in kind of a prolonged spring. So I had all my summer stuff ready, put them out, and it was just on like the very bottom of the temperature zone for these plants. Hey, really shouldn't get below 50. And then at night it was getting down like sometimes in the high 40s, and things like this. So definitely these plants were in more of a survival mode than like a mode to really produce and start
Mm-hmm.
to put on that green growth there at the beginning while it's still cool, and then that heat sort of triggers the fruiting of the plant as normal. Now there are a few plants that have recovered from that, but definitely a lot of stuff did not go as planned because of this prolonged spring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just something you can't plan for. Mother Nature,
Right.
what's it gonna
Yeah.
do?
Right,
Unfortunately.
exactly. So why don't we
But
go ahead and start then with what exactly went um, not as expected further into the season than the growing season. So for me, I had two areas where I was planting corn this year. One was in an area that I knew was going to get ample sun, and then another area that did have some shade. So I don't know. I'm sure I've mentioned this a bunch of times. I have a few trees in my garden, so playing with that rotating shade throughout the seasons and throughout the year is something I've got to deal with. In the back corner, then I knew, hey, if this corn can grow maybe 18 inches, it's going to get all the sun it needs. But until then, it might, be a little lacking. I was just hoping it could get to that. So made sure that the soil was, had some good nutrition in it and, made sure everything was fertilized. But it just never took off. That amount of sun um, just wasn't enough for it to get to the height that it needed. So, and it's still stunted. I could
mm,
probably just take it out now, but the other area went a lot better. I knew it was going to get that sun, but even there, I grow artichokes right next to them. Those get a lot taller a lot earlier, and they, didn't mind the prolonged spring. And so in the morning, where those further stalks are getting plenty of sun, the ones closest to the artichokes are stunted in their growth as well. So that's something that I'm definitely going to prioritize with the corn next year is like I need that baking in the sun all day.
They love it.
So
They just
they
can't get
love it.
enough.
They need it. Yeah.
Yeah, I had that with some stuff too, like my okra that was next to my corn. Okra typically should get taller than corn, but my corn took off and my okra was stunted from not transplanting quick enough. So the corn basically just started to shade it out eventually.
Excuse me.
My okra's like 3 feet tall at the most, and it's
Hmm.
producing, which is nice, but it's like okra should get, 6, 7 feet tall.
That's right.
Um,
Yeah, and I had the same problem. I put once again, tried to work with some shade there, and it just never worked out for me. So I actually have
mhm.
some growing now. Going to try and see if I can get it going. It has warmed up plenty. The conditions are right, so if I can get it out and with enough time left in the season, then hopefully that
Mhm.
prolonged spring will be a prolonged summer too.
Yeah, yeah, it doesn't get
Yeah.
too cold too quick, and okra loves the sun, so I think you'll be
Right.
okay, and you'll get some. Yeah, and talking
Yeah.
about spots of planting things, I had a spot too where I put the pineapple tomatoes, and I thought it got pretty good sun, but after planting, I realized the sun really doesn't start to shine on the spot until close to like noon. So
Mm,
it's not getting that morning sun almost at all. Now that the plants are taller, they're starting to kind of reach out there and, reach towards the sun. But yeah, I think next year for the spot, something that isn't, doesn't need as much sun would probably do a little bit better. But tomatoes are pretty easy to grow, so they're starting to get up there. But yeah,
right.
definitely think about how much sun, how much shade does each spot get, and then that can help you decide which plant to put there.
Yeah, one plant that is working well with partial shade for me is the squash. And then I also have a spot just like you're talking about out front where my house is blocking the morning sun, but it gets great afternoon and evening sun all the way until the sun goes down below the horizon. And dwarf
Mhm.
tomatoes do great in that condition where they can get that sun, still probably 8 hours a day minimum, right? But because it's just a smaller plant, they're good with that. So that I've had success with that.
Yeah, like the cherry tomatoes too, I'm sure. Since they're just smaller in
Right.
general, they're not going to be wanting as much sun.
Yeah, that would work out great too.
Hmm.
So one thing that didn't work for me, which I'm very disappointed about, is and I know that it didn't work out for either of us, but I'll start with my story, is the yellow watermelon. So we had high hopes for our watermelon dreams here. We wanted to have a little competition where we grew, each grew a watermelon or a few watermelons and got our biggest and weighed it to see who grew the biggest one. But now we've downgraded. We've decided the new competition is who can grow a watermelon at all. Maybe just
Yeah,
one,
period. Yeah.
period. Just watermelon at all. So, yes, I have the first round watermelon I put in was during that prolonged spring. And really, I was kind of seeing some signs. It's going to warm up. Let's get that in the ground, right? To beat Mitchell. But it just, yes, it didn't really warm up. I had a couple warm days and then went back to those cooler temperatures, and it just seems to have totally stunted the growth of that watermelon. So I have a few more in the greenhouse. It is warming up. They seem to be loving the heat, so we're going to try to get another one out and see if we can get any watermelon going at all. So
Hmm.
Mitchell, I know yours is a little different of a situation. So what happened with you?
Yeah, yeah, mine just got so root balled since I wasn't able to bring them out quick enough. And they're finally starting to, get bigger now. I have a vine that's probably 3 foot long at max. It's getting there. It sucks too because I put so much space out in my garden for the vines to
Yeah,
grow. It's
yeah,
like, this is all for watermelon right here. And then it's just blank. It's
right.
the rest of the garden's full, and then this has nothing, but they're starting to get there. But yeah, I put them out there. Root balled, so they didn't start too well. But I was honestly very, very surprised. Like 3 weeks, they stayed the same size, maybe 6 inches tall or so, did absolutely nothing. And then just one random day, I could tell that they almost like doubled in growth.
Mm,
I don't know if the roots finally, got to a happy place, or maybe the weather just got better, but they eventually became happy, and now they're finally starting to grow. So yeah, I'm hoping to get at least one before the year's out is the goal now.
Yeah, me too. Me too. All right. So, one thing we also wanted to touch on before we go to a few things that went right is our three sisters method. So, we've had some examples of this working. It hasn't totally gone wrong, but
Mhm.
one thing that we've realized is, the timing between planting these things is very important. So, here's a for instance, right? So, Mitchell planted his corn and beans together, and the beans outgrew the corn. I planted my seedlings of corn, boom, with beans that hadn't sprouted yet, right? So just put the beans in the ground at the same time. And that has grown. I have a couple that have outgrown the corn, but not by much. And most of them are keeping good pace. So that's something you want to think about for sure. Anything you want to touch on that
Mhm.
method, Mitchell?
Yeah, just depending on your bean variety too. Like I'm growing mostly rattlesnake beans, and they grow so vigorously, so
Mm-hmm.
the corn just cannot keep up with it. The corn still did pretty well, thankfully, but and it's nice now. I harvested the corn, so but I'm going to keep the stalks up, and now the beans are happy. I'm just letting them grow all throughout, so it's
Right.
perfect. But yeah, definitely, I think the beans shaded out the corn a little more than I would have liked. So the corn didn't get as big as I was hoping, but I mean, I have a bunch of beans, so it's not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's like a happy accident. It's not a total failure, right? You still got the corn, you still got the beans. It didn't work in conjunction like you expected. So maybe there's a way we can get that to happen next year. And
Hmm.
same for me.
Yeah,
So,
and
all right, go ahead.
I was just gonna say too, I am happy with. I used cucumbers as the ground cover, and it is working
Hmm.
pretty well. They were a little stunted to start, but now, like the lemon cucumber, it's almost completely covering below the corn, and it's super
Yeah.
happy. So I'm glad that
Yeah,
worked out.
my
Because
lemon is very vigorous as well, my lemon cucumber. All right, let's go to what went right now. So that's some things we changed for next year. Here's some things that we did right this year. So we want to talk about from the beginning, once again, the seed starting process. We chose the botanical interest seeds, and we've talked about this a few times, but just the highest quality of seeds that we've ever dealt with. Our germination rates have been excellent. The mixes that we use different stuff, seems to work great with, all the as long as you know a little bit about seed starting, you can make this work. These seeds are really, really great. So we got great germination rates. All of them grew into great plants. It was just then our handling of those plants, I think, or the natural conditions not being to the liking of those plants, that was the downfall. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, yeah, and I'm excited too for we've only used botanical interests once, but I'm curious how they rotate their selection year to year. So what kind of new stuff there might be next year, and
Yeah.
as well, the selection is huge. So even if they don't add any new plants, I'm sure we can just find a couple new things that still look cool that we'd want to do next year from them.
Oh yeah, we definitely didn't try everything. And even just for fall, there's so many things we can do in the fall that we aren't doing right now. And that'll be
Yeah, yeah,
exciting.
I needed to start getting that ready for the
Yeah, thinking
fall.
about it and
for
maybe starting some seeds here soon.
hmm
All right. So, Mitchell, why don't you tell us something in your garden other than the seed starting that you are happy about how it went or how it's
Yeah,
going?
my typical Indiana, the corn is just fantastic out here. The My sweet corn didn't do super well. Still got pretty nice sized cobs and just harvested them last week actually. But the glass gem corn specifically just absolutely took off once I put it into the garden. I remember I planted it. It was probably almost a foot tall already. I had it in like a little pot, not this little seedling pot. I went ahead and transplanted it into a bigger, maybe 6-inch pot just because I was still waiting for it to warm up outside. But once I put it into the ground, it hit 2-3 feet tall in just a couple weeks. And right now, I mean, I can see it outside this window. It's probably at least 7 feet tall. It's taller than me. So I wonder, I have the glass gem in the front yard and then the sweet corn in the backyard because you don't want two different corn varieties to cross pollinate. especially if one variety is for eating, like sweet corn, and then the glass gem is more for, looks, but then also like popcorn or flour. So if you start getting glass gem pollinating your sweet corn's not going to be all edible. I don't even want to imagine trying to bite into that.
Hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, very, very excited for that. So I don't know if it's the bed itself that made it do better, if it's the variety. Um, I guess now that I think about it, the glass gem kind of gets sun almost all day, and then it gets a ton of the really hot evening sun. So I bet
Mm,
that probably helped it out a bunch. But yeah,
nice.
anything on your side that did extra well that you weren't expecting this year?
Well, I think right now I'm still riding the high from the garlic harvest that I had, which I
Mm.
grew over winter this past year, and it was just awesome. Like I've already had my first taste, and the garlic tastes amazing. It was super easy. It grew in partial shade. The only thing that is a little bit tough with garlic is the time commitment. I think I did like 8 or 9 months is how long this stuff takes. You
Oh
started in
wow.
like mid fall and you're harvesting mid spring next year or something like that,
Mm.
or
How,
even late spring.
how do you know when to harvest it?
So the tops, like onions, will die off,
Mm.
and then that's when
Okay.
you know.
Kind of like
Yep.
potatoes too. Once the plant
Yep.
basically starts to die, then you know it's ready. Hmm.
Yep, absolutely. So that was great. I just did like half a bed, but next season, as much room as I can devote, because over winter, you don't need that much room for like the stuff that you're transplanting out. Maybe like some greens that can take the cold and stuff like that. And that's just here. I mean, with you guys even more so in Indiana, you know, you can
Mm-hmm.
get hardneck garlics that love and need that cold. So
Hmm.
just fill the garden with it, with that and onions and just go for it.
Yeah. Would that be
So
considered
I
a
really
cover
love that.
crop, you think? Or are the leaves not like big enough to really cover during the winter?
Yeah, I don't think you would consider that because they're very similar to onion leaves, really, but the garlic leaves they're sort of like a grass, how at the
Yeah.
bottom it's sort of a tube, but then it flattens out into just like a leaf, and that's what it
Mm.
is. And they're just thin, they're not like uh, they wouldn't cover much. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Is there a
I
good way
wouldn't
to
consider that, but
could you preserve that garlic at all? You thought of ways to do
yeah.
that?
Yeah, so I braided the tops. So you cut off the leaves up to like the very top. There's like a little shoot at the top that you can leave. And then I braided them together and just tied a little piece of twine at the top and at the bottom to hold that braid. And then I just put some nails in a door frame and hung them up to dry inside. And then and then they're just good there for 6 months. I mean, just let them dry. And then when
Mm.
I need one, I just cut it off the stem, use it, and then once I cut I braid three of them together. Once I cut the three, I put the rest of it in the compost.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's also like garlic powder. I'm sure eventually, if you wanted to,
Yep.
even probably lasted even longer, kind of just make a spice out of it.
Right. And that's a great garlic powder is a great thing to use the garlic that didn't succeed. Use that for garlic powder. If you have any that aren't segmented or are small or like got
Just
dug up
crush
by
it
an
up.
animal. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Chop it up, dry it out or dehydrate it if you have a dehydrator, and then yeah, blend it up.
Hmm. And I've noticed that with I'm just learning this year that to keep plants fresher longer, like that garlic, for example, you probably don't open them all up. You just kind of leave it almost how like it came out of the garden.
I
And
didn't
that,
even wash it. I didn't even wash it.
yeah,
I
exactly.
just brushed it off, hung it up.
That's how it was with the corn too. When I was looking up how to, you can't really make corn last very long at all, but it
Hmm.
said to prolong it as long as you can. Don't take it out of the husks yet. Just keep it in the husks. And then I also found out that's the same thing with blackberries. I harvested a big bowl full, and it said don't wash them at all. You can just put them straight into the fridge because if you wash them, they'll just start to kind of get wet and moist, and then start to go rancid. But just put them straight in the fridge, straight from the garden, and you'll be good for a week ish or so.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's like the same with eggs. And that's just a good rule of thumb. Like,
Yeah.
Make sure
Yeah.
that there's no bugs on it. But other than that, wait until before you eat it to wash it on most
Mm-hmm.
things, I would
Exactly.
say. And they'll last longer. Okay, so what else are we happy about? Let's see. Is it your turn, my turn? I'll go ahead and go next.
Oh, I think I just
So
did corn. Yeah, go on.
yeah, because you just did that. That's right. So my next thing I want to talk about is my tomatoes. So I have said before that I own a gardening business out here in the Bay Area. So I grow on the farm that I live at two gardens, like one kind of up on top of a hill, one in my backyard, and then our neighbors also have a garden of four, about 5x5 beds or so. Well, no, they're rectangular, so maybe 5x3 beds, and grow there as well. So tomatoes are in every single one of those gardens, right? And all of the different varieties, because, we all share from what we get in the gardens, and, hey, I'll trade you this for that. And that's part of the fun. Well, I grew all different types of varieties because I wanted to, I didn't want to grow 100 of one thing and then, everyone has so many we can't eat them. So
Mm-hmm.
all the different varieties are doing great this year. One thing that I've done very differently is I've really kept up on the trimming, the pruning is the word I was looking for. And I pruned to 1 to 2 liters, except for one group that I'm doing in my backyard. I'm growing them as pole tomatoes. So that will just be the central liter, and also growing some patio tomatoes in pots. Those are even doing well. Cherries and all different things. They're all doing excellent. So we're really, really
Mm-hmm.
happy with the tomatoes.
Yeah, if you want to get into gardening, start with tomatoes because you
Oh,
almost
yeah.
can't go wrong. They're
And
just going to
most
keep
people do, I
growing.
think, most people do.
Yeah, yeah, and that's well, you said you've been trimming. That's something I really haven't done honestly too much this year.
Mm,
That I think I'll probably need to do a little bit more next year because I read you don't want to trim determinate tomatoes too much since
that's
they only
true.
have like a set amount of growth. But definitely the leaves that are like touching the soil, go ahead and get those off. You don't want to get them sick when they're touching the soil. Bugs crawl up them. But yeah, and I did a little test this year, which I already knew how it was going to turn out, but growing the patio cherry tomatoes in the ground versus in pots, and of course the pots did better. Like it was,
Oh, yeah.
it was
After
obvious,
I saw
quite a
how
bit
good
better.
yours were doing, I started 4 more. So I have
Oh,
like I have 2 in pots right now that are doing great. One of them, here's actually an interesting story for people. So I was worried about trimming these, even though because they were at the beginning. I just wanted to get like all the initial leaders out of there and just give it some good growth, and then I was just ready to let it go. Well, I was so vigorous with the trimming, I accidentally trimmed like the head leader, basically the growth of the
oh,
plant. And that was the
yikes!
only one, right? And I realized what I did, crap. But interestingly enough, it had already set some flowers. And I have 2 beautiful fruit sets on this that are huge. I mean, we've talked about this. These patio tomatoes are probably at least double the size I expected them to be.
Mm-hmm.
They're really a good size, a good, between small and medium sized tomato. And they're really nice size, and they're, now already ripening because all the energy of the plant has been devoted to these 2 fruit sets instead of, no more energy needed to grow. So something to think about, if you want some early harvest and you just have a bunch of extra plants, maybe something to think about doing. Hey, let's head a couple of these. I think that's what it's called, heading. You just chop the growth
Mm-hmm.
off. We already have 2 or 3 fruit sets. Let's get these ripening now, and it does work. So don't throw it away. Also, if you do that, oh shit, then you can just keep it in the
Mm-hmm.
pot and it's all good.
Yeah,
It'll still work.
yeah, especially if it's already getting, if it's already kind of big.
Right.
That reminds
Exactly.
me, I bought a couple Romas from the store just to make like pasta sauce and stuff this year. And when I got home, I realized one of them had the leader cut off already.
Oh, what
But
the
the
heck?
yeah, but the plant was like, it was a couple inches tall. It just had two
Uh-huh.
leaves and then the middle was cut and it completely died. It didn't grow at all.
Of
So
course. Like, what the heck is gonna
yeah,
happen?
I don't know who was trying to sell that, and I don't know why I bought it. So just be careful about that when you're out there shopping for your tomatoes.
For
And
sure.
as well, that you reminded me too, I did all the patio cherries in the pots. I had some in the ground, but then I put all my pineapple tomatoes, the indeterminates, in the ground in a certain spot, and then they're doing really well.
Hmm.
Well, my potted tomatoes, I had one plant that was doing better than the rest, and it's growing like a huge tomato, like the size of my fist. So I thought the patio cherries were just, doing super well.
Oh.
But I realized during transplanting, I accidentally put a pineapple tomato in a pot with all the rest of my cherries, and it doesn't fit.
It's doing well. That's good.
It's
Good to
doing
know.
well, yeah. So I mean, it's a happy accident.
Yeah. So we should talk a little bit about, we're wanting to save and propagate these tomatoes over the winter to get an early start on next year. So can we talk about a few different ways to do that? I mean, obviously there is, you know, saving the seed from a fruit. We all know that, right? And then drying that seed out, propagating that seed into a new plant. But there are some easier ways to do it. So tell us
Hmm.
about some of those.
Yeah, I've actually been meaning to do some research on that because I've never tried to overwinter something like that before. But like
Right.
clipping off one of the stems, basically, right, and then clearing off a bunch of the leaves because you don't want it to trying to supply those leaves with a bunch of nutrients. You just want it to basically live to start, and then it'll start to get bigger itself. But yeah, what's your plan for that this winter? I have the greenhouse. That's most
Right.
likely what I'll use. But yeah, I bought a sun sugar tomato, indeterminate, and that's the one that I'm going to try to live forever. Hopefully, is the plan.
Right, right. So this is a pretty cool challenge, and I think I'm going to try to do this too. Maybe with whatever I like better. I'm growing the pineapple like you. I'm also growing some black Krim tomatoes. So if I really like one of those, maybe I'll start. But a good way to start with this is to root a leader of the, like Mitchell was saying, a stem. But you'll see there's the main growth. There are the normal leaves, and then from the node where the normal leaf connects to the main stem, there will be sometimes another one that will grow. That's a leader. So let that
Mm-hmm.
grow, get a couple leaves on it, cut that. And then I think the best way to do it is just to let it live in some water for a little bit. There's also, people use rooting hormone. I've also heard that cinnamon is a good alternative to rooting hormone. So interesting, maybe try that. But
Got a
then
little fire alarm there.
yeah, sorry about that. I don't know what that is. I think it might be
Oh, there you
we
go.
have like a oven that beeps when it's ready, so it might be
Oh, you're good.
that. But anyway, yeah. So you can do the rooting hormone, but the best way to do it, easiest way, is just to put it in some water or a wet paper towel for a couple days. Wait till you see those roots coming out, and then just put it in some soil. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a great way to do it. And then another way is just to um, actually transplant the whole tomato plant into a pot, trim it back heavily to like just the bottom, basically, like the first split or something like that, and then just put it in the greenhouse. That works with peppers. That's how people do peppers, but I've also heard it does work with tomatoes as well.
Hmm.
And
Do you
then
trim
when
the roots too on that, or you leave those
I mean,
alone?
by pulling it out, you're going to lose some roots. But I think you're just supposed to leave them alone.
Oh.
Like try to get a pot that'll at least support that,
Mm-hmm.
size root ball. And
Okay.
yeah, and then some people can get that to work, and those end up looking like little trees because the original growth kind of barks over. You've probably seen this on peppers before, and
Oh,
then the new
yeah.
growth shoots out of the sides, kind of like leaves on like a tree. So it's
Mm.
an interesting look as well. But yeah, that'll be a
Yeah.
fun one. We'll try that out a
Mm-hmm.
couple different ways and see which way works the best.
Do you know, real
So
quick,
go
for
ahead.
peppers? I
Mm-hmm.
don't. I don't think you can cut them and they grow from the stem, right? You would just have to overwinter the whole plant, right? Is that
You
how it
can
works
cut
for
them
peppers?
back. You can cut them back, but you have to leave a certain amount of stem, and I don't know exactly what that is. But like,
Yeah.
imagine what they look like is like the first Y. You like cut it back to that, or like just a few branches on each of those, and then that's what
Hmm.
you overwinter in the pot.
Okay, yeah, because peppers don't really have like leaders that you can cut off and grow in water. I think you just
Right.
have to
Yeah.
deal with the
Yeah.
plant
You have to
itself.
Exactly. Yeah, you won't be able to take cuttings as easily from that. It'll,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, be in a
Yeah, I've
pot.
got
But
some.
luckily, those are smaller plants, so that's ideal for a situation like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got some the
Um,
shishitos and the cubanelles. I'm hoping to maybe keep one of each alive. Is the plan
yeah, that would be great.
over
I
the
would love
winter.
to do that with my peppers too. So, did you want to talk about our sunflower as another thing that we really enjoyed
Um,
the performance of?
yeah, I have the tall sunflower, and it's odd because I have I think three or four in the back, and they're 7, 8 feet tall right now, and like we were saying earlier, starting to get that actual head on top. And I want to harvest some of the sunflower seeds this year, and cook them
Yeah.
and eat them. That's reminds me of my baseball days, eating sunflower seeds during a game.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to relive that as an adult. But yeah, some in the backyard doing absolutely fantastic. And then I have two in the front yard. They're like they have their heads now, but they're probably 3 feet tall, like, and they're
Hmm.
real thin. They just I don't know if it's the sun. It's probably the plot of land, is what I'm assuming. The
Hmm.
bed in the front must have just not had good nutrients. So
Yeah.
even if you have one plant, depending on where you plant it, it can determine how well it does. But yeah, I'm very happy with the tall sunflowers, and I think you have the mammoth sunflower, right?
Yeah, so I'm growing three of those in a little plot in the back, and they're at the 7 or 8 foot mark as well right now, and
Mm-hmm.
just starting to see that bud emerge. So definitely still have a little bit of growth before I start to see that head develop. But yeah, the when I was planting those, one thing I noticed is like these have big seeds, so I'm excited to see if they, if they have
Yeah.
bigger kernels and maybe more potential with those. But yep. All right. So let's also talk about before we finish up here. Um, we had one more thing. Oh yes. Okay. So how we've used some of our harvests in cooking. So I'll start with this with the garlic that I was talking about earlier, and has just recently gotten to the point where it's dried out enough to use. And so I cut one down. I had some onions from earlier in the season that are fully cured. Got one of those and just did a little pasta with a little butter and olive oil, some noodles, and the onion and the garlic. And it was super good. And just a simple recipe that, is many of the ingredients are grown, and that just is awesome. That's such a good feeling to do. So, and then I know
Mm-hmm.
Mitchell has been doing some things with this as well.
Yeah. Yeah. That's nice. The onions and garlic, that you can do that kind of earlier in the season too. You don't have to wait till like, the end of summer till you can start harvesting stuff.
That's right.
But yeah, here, mostly with my perennials like the strawberries, I made strawberry jam. The rhubarb, I made rhubarb jam too. Made a rhubarb crisp too. It was very delicious. And things like rhubarb are nice because you can actually freeze the stalks, and as well with like, I think you can freeze strawberries. I know you can freeze blackberries at least, and then use them like in a different season. But yeah, very recently I harvested a big bowl of blackberries and then made some blackberry jam. So, and it was very easy too. Like, I'm not a chef or anything, but I was able to figure it out, and it's delicious. It's just I did 3 cups of blackberries themselves, and then 1 cup of sugar, and then 1 tablespoon of lemon juice. Basically, just throw that in a pot, boil it down for it was like 20, 30 minutes until it starts to get like a little thick, and then put it in a jar, and you're good. And then I'm hoping to do a little bit more just throughout the next couple of weeks and actually can them with like the water bath method, where
Mm,
you boil it, and then the cans, the lid like pops, seals it shut, and you don't have to store it in a refrigerator. You can just store it sitting out, so, and it lasts about a whole year if you do it like that. So that's the
yeah. If we
plan.
get
But
that to work, we should make a video on that because I want to know how to do that too.
yeah, I'm learning. I have the
Yeah.
equipment, I just need to do it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We'll get it. We'll get it done. So let's see. I think that's just about it. Anything else you wanted to touch on as far as things going really well this year? I had a good lettuce harvest this uh, late spring, and even like I said, it was prolonged, so I even like had another round ready, threw that in, that went great. So
Mm.
um, definitely tried to use it as well as I could, but I've frozen a lot of that just in glass containers, shoved them in there with a paper towel on either side and just froze them. And they thaw out super quick. If you just grab a handful and put it in a bowl with a new paper towel to absorb anything, any ice chips that come off, you just get like a nice crisp salad like you just harvested it, but nice and cold. So it's a great way of storing that.
Yeah, I want to have a couple things that we grow now, and then I want to be eating it in the winter, like freezing something or storing something. That's the ultimate goal right there.
Right.
But yeah, the red burgundy okra is doing pretty well for me. Just harvested probably about a dozen of them or so. The plants are short, but they're producing, so it's like I'm not going to complain. I'll take it. And the round zucchini. No, I'm sure we'll do another update like at the end of summer, beginning of fall. But we've got a couple things like the round zucchini that are starting to get kind of big. So we'll update you guys on that once we harvest them, probably here in a couple weeks or so.
Yeah, for sure. And hope you guys enjoyed. If you are watching us on YouTube, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you haven't visited our website, we have a website, howtocultivate.com, with a ton of great information, kind of simplifying some more complex topics about gardening, as well as, a how to grow guide on pretty much all the great, I would say beginner, even intermediate, and maybe even a few advanced level planting techniques on all the fruits and vegetables that you want to grow. So make sure you check that out and come back and see us next time. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you then.